Welcome to the Rediscovery Journal, the podcast where healing meets honesty. I'm your host, Sophia, and each week we dive deep into conversations of self discovery, mental health, and the raw, real moments that shape who we are. Whether you're on the journey of growth, seeking clarity, or simply need a reminder you're not alone, you're in the right place. Let's rediscover what it means to truly know ourselves, one conversation at a time. So, this week's episode, I have a special guest who is a writer who has written multiple pieces for the New York Times, Allure, Feminist, and Vogue. She has previously worked as the feature editor for Teen Vogue and was heavily involved in the 2024 Tender to Swipe campaign for Tender. I don't know why I said tender twice. It's fine. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for coming on. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Like I said, I'm glad that it will soon be over with Monday, but
Yeah,
we're
me too.
thriving. Is there any background information that you want to share about yourself starting out?
I live in Philadelphia. I'm in grad school at Drexel University doing a master's in communication, culture, and media. And I'm also a freelance journalist who writes for a number of different publications. And I also do some consulting. I'm an Aquarius, which is integral to my personality. No, I'm just kidding. What else do you want to know about me?
So, what initially drew you to writing? Because I was really blown away with the fact that you had written not only so many pieces, but so many pieces for so many cool
Thank
places.
you. That's so kind of you. Yeah, so I always loved to write but I never really considered it as a career path. In my mid 30s now. In my early 20s, I was doing what's called trend research and trend forecasting for a sneaker company, Converse. And I would go to all these art fairs and exhibits and little boutiques and just met and came across a lot of interesting cultural figures. And I realized that I wanted to connect with these people more deeply and learn about their paths and
Hmm.
how they found their chosen mediums that they were working in or what are lessons that they've learned through their craft. So I started a blog in 2014. It was called Culture Island. Culture Island.
Ooh, I love that name.
Thank you. It's still online if you want to check it out. I don't know how much longer it'll stay online. It's expensive to keep up a website for so many years that you're not using. But anyways, I would interview artists, designers, all different types of creative people, and it was so much fun and I learned so much about creativity and creative people and what makes them tick, and I learned a lot about myself in the process, and I realized that I wanted the opportunity to write pieces for magazines and newspapers, and because I was very interested in what I would say is emerging culture,
Hmm.
not necessarily mainstream, and so I was like, it'd be really cool if I could shine a light on these people's work in a bigger way, and so I
Yeah.
started to pitch magazines story ideas and slowly started to publish my work, and within a couple years, yeah, had clips with the New York Times, and I got to write a story about genderless clothing for kids for the kids section of the New York Times, and I interviewed little kids about how they
That's
see
so
their gender
cute.
in their clothing. Yeah, that was really sweet. And yeah, I just loved the experience of I've always been someone who's really in tune with cultural shifts and what are people starting to do that people haven't really talked about in a bigger way yet. And so that's always kind of been my thing is writing about emerging culture, emerging trends, and also I tend to be very intersectional in my approach, so I write a lot about feminist issues, intersectional feminist issues. I write a lot about the queer community. I try to use my voice for social good and give a platform to people who don't historically have a platform.
Hmm.
And so those are the kinds of things that have guided my work. And I've had other jobs over the last, I guess it's 15, 14 years now since I graduated college. I've had other jobs, but I think the glue of who I am is that I'm a writer.
Now, making that first step to kind of reach out to people and say, "Hey, can I talk to you about what you're doing?" I feel like that's so hard. Where did you kind of get your confidence for that? Because I know for
Yeah.
me, that's where I'm at right now. And I'm like, "Hi, you may not know me, but your work is cool." And it's a little intimidating.
I think I just expressed interest and had a genuine desire to learn more about them and whatever it is that they're doing, and also would let them know that I was thinking of it was like kind of like ground research, so that I was thinking of pitching a story to whichever publication or publications, and um that that helped me figure that out, and I don't know, I just have always loved connecting with people in a more deeper way and asking questions, and I think that's what really guides my work is I like being curious and asking questions about why things are the way they are, or what could be more feminist, or where there could be more equity in the world, and empathy, I think. Empathy also really drives my work.
Yeah, I feel like we live in a world where you see a lot of people kind of do the opposite of that. And so sometimes it's what's the word I'm looking for? People are more like aggressive towards people who show empathy because we're in a time period where that isn't seen as much.
Mhm.
Why
Yeah.
do you feel like it's so important to kind of get the message out there of what is actually going on and what we can do to grow as a society?
Uh, I think we each play a role, and for me, my role is to tell stories that change how people view the world or see themselves, so that we can become better people in a better world where everyone's treated fairly and equally and
Mhm.
equitably. And yeah, so that's really what drives me is like how can I use my platform for good or for change?
One thing that I think is really cool about you is I feel like you have such a well rounded arsenal, I guess, of strengths or activities that you're involved in. You're not just doing one thing. I mean, I consider you kind of to be a fashion icon, to be honest with you.
Wow.
When I was looking at your accounts, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm in love with her clothing. I'm
Thank
in
you.
love with like your website that you have, baby girl. I think it's so cool that you've written because honestly, you have to have a lot of confidence in yourself to make a move and be like, I'm going to do this and I'm good
Mhm.
at it. And I think we live in a time period where it's a lot easier to tell other people, wow, you're great at that, than it is to think that about yourself. It's a lot easier to
Yeah.
be like, oh, I could never, than to lean into it. Where do you think you got your strength to lean into it and try all these different things?
I think there's part of me that's still figuring out who I am, and I'm a bit of a multi-hyphenate is what I would say, and so I have a lot of different interests, and I think at heart in everything that I'm doing, I'm a storyteller, and that's what is the glue between all these different things I've done
Hmm.
when I was young. Fashion, like style and art and reading and writing and pop culture really helped me form an identity.
Mm.
I grew up in a bit of a difficult environment, and so I really relied on art and culture to help shape who I am without the shadow of some of the trauma, I would say, and
I really admire that,
thank
to be
you.
honest with you, because I feel like I'm still at a phase where I'm like, who am I and what am I doing?
Still really figuring it out, it has been tough to be a freelancer, a journalist in the last I feel like especially since Trump was elected a second time. I think a lot of the media has been playing it safe, and they don't want to
Say the wrong thing.
say the wrong thing or risk their advertisers because
Mhm.
we're entering a recession, an economic crisis, and I tend to write things that are more political, and I just have felt like I'm not getting as many commissions as I have over the last decade. So it's been really tough, but
Mhm.
I, applied for school in the meantime and doing that, and then I've been working on a book proposal, and that's starting to come together, so that's really
Yeah. Will you
exciting.
talk a little bit about that? So what kind of book are you gearing towards? Are you gearing towards like poetry or is it going to be autobiographical?
It's gonna be nonfiction, maybe what's called narrative nonfiction, but mostly grounded in reporting and then with some of my personal experience woven in, but not too personal is what I would say.
Mm.
Was exploring writing something more personal, but I decided that I'm not necessarily ready to go there yet.
And it can be really hard to dive into stuff like that. I know I had conversation with someone who is a poet, and she talked about like the struggle of really you have to really really deal with things that you've gone through in your life when you put
Yeah.
that pen to paper, and sometimes you're not ready or at that point yet where you can move through that.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think I thought I was ready, but as I've gotten further along in the process of finding an agent and working on a proposal, finding an agent and everything, I've decided that I prefer to have my first book be rooted in my reporting,
Mhm.
not tell my full story yet because it's very personal to me.
Yeah, and that's so hard to bear that all out there and have, probably everyone in the world see beat, especially when I know for me, like I think everyone has their own trauma that they go through,
Mhm.
and moving through that and seeing things as they are instead of, trying to push it down can really be difficult to accept at times. Okay, your cat is really cute.
Yeah, this is Lola.
One thing that I also thought was really cool is that you host a craft club and creative workshops. What got you into that first?
So I've hosted a lot of workshops and events over the years. I'm not doing it as much right now, um, because I'm really focused on my book project. But when I was doing that blog back in the 2010s, after a while of interviewing people, I realized that I wanted to create physical experiences and spaces where their work could be shown. And so I was living in New York at the time and I started approaching little boutiques and other types of spaces that had blank walls, and I was like, "Hey,
That's
you know,
so
could
cool.
I curate a show in your space with this artist? It would bring traffic to your space. All you would need to do is let us use your walls for a month or whatever." And I hosted a lot of successful events that way, and I felt like at the time I was really another reason I started the blog and started hosting events was because I wanted to feel more connected to community,
Mm,
and New York's a huge city, and I just felt like I wanted to feel more connected to a community. So, I hosted over probably around 45 to 50
wow, that's
events
so
in the
cool.
last 15 years, and I've done everything from a zine making workshop with an artist, poetry and writing inspired by your dating life, collage workshops, watercolor painting with a jewelry designer. One of my favorite events I did was a storytelling event about periods for World Menstrual Hygiene Day, and we had 18 people share stories or jokes or poems about their periods, and it was just, like, the most beautifully human experience of my life. Um, New York Times covered it, which was really cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah, yeah, and, um, I'm an ideas person through and through, like, I have so many ideas, always too many ideas,
I feel you.
and I feel like the events were a really great way to kind of work out those ideas,
Make them come to life.
collaboration with other people, and, like, bring the community into the fold. So, that was really positive, and I would host events whenever I would travel too. I would if I knew people or got connected to artists or creatives, like, I would kind of host an event everywhere I went. So, I hosted an event in London, in LA, in other cities. I can't even honestly can't even remember. It was a while ago, since I've really done this. And then when I was diagnosed with OCD and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, I also have ADHD. I started treatment for OCD, and in the program, they have you do, like, hobbies and activities to bring your mood
Mhm.
up. And so I
Oh, okay.
started making jewelry that was kid jewelry, like friendship bracelets, but kind of more artistic. And
Listen, that's not kid jewelry, that's fashion now.
and they would say things like rehab or like nods to just things that I love, like Gilmore Girls or sayings or words that I loved. And I would use the beads almost like I was painting, I would say, where the colors and the beads would be these beautiful in this in beautiful cadence and like a kaleidoscope of colors and I became obsessed. Like I would go to every Michael's, every Joann's and just was obsessed. I think it was borderline not healthy, but it brought me a lot of joy and I feel like it allowed me to connect with my younger spirit. Because I was always super creative growing up. And I love fashion, but I don't feel like I'm a designer. I'm more conceptual. And in my early career, I worked in fashion and I interned in fashion. And I really enjoyed those experiences, but I felt like designing fashion is too technical for me. And I'm not a technical minded person.
Mhm.
I'm more
Flowing.
free flowing, conceptually driven. And so, what I had after working in fashion for a few years and then starting the blog, what I realized was that writing and storytelling was a way that I could touch all the things I was interested in without having to become them myself.
Oh,
So,
that's such a
interview a
profound
film,
thought.
I could interview a filmmaker, I could interview a chef, I could interview a fashion designer, I could write about the things that were interesting to me, and I was always kind of looking at things through that, like, emerging culture, what's interesting that people aren't talking about type of lens, and going back to how things have been difficult since with writing since Trump was elected, I also feel like writing pieces about trends has become much more common.
Mm,
Back when I started writing and I was writing about
it was more
emerging
niche.
cultural trends, it felt more niche. And now the trend cycle is so quick that it's and then a lot of the pieces about trends I feel like are often written by in-house writers.
Mm.
So it's just become difficult to kind of do the things that I love in reporting, and that's why I'm excited to explore book projects now, which is something I've always wanted. I remember in 5th grade in my yearbook, I wrote I wanted to be an actress and an author, and I definitely don't wanna be an actress. I would love to do stand-up one day.
You should.
My humor has been a really amazing balm or, like, salve for my trauma and being neurotic, and I would love to do storytelling or things like that, and I have a little bit, not stand-up, but, like, oral storytelling, but I'm not really comfortable in front of a crowd is what I would say.
Mm.
Writing is, like I think writing is my safe space.
I love that.
I love when I'm just rambling at this point, but I love when I'm writing a piece and the ideas are just, like, flowing and it feels like the closest thing to heaven.
Mm.
Um
That's how you know you're doing the right thing for yourself. Because I feel like so
Yeah,
many other people feel like they do their job and they're just pushing by to pay bills, versus if you
yeah,
have that passion and you literally feel like, "I couldn't stop this even if I wanted to," then you kinda know it's meant for you.
yeah, totally. I mean, it's been difficult financially since I'm not getting as many commissions. I did get some scholarship for my grad school program, and I'm using some savings to pay the difference. It's only a year and a half program, and it'll give me, like, great foundation because I studied art in college. Since I was always doing art growing up, when it came time to applying to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I was like, "Well, I'll apply to art school, and that'll be a way to get into college."
Yeah.
And then while I was at college, I don't feel like I spent enough time really thinking about what I wanted to do. I was partying and just having fun and living life, and I also felt like the program I was in didn't necessarily really help me figure anything out. It was a big school, so you had to really take advantage of the opportunities, and I feel like out of fear, I didn't, but
I
yeah,
think
and I think, yes, like, I am a writer, I write, but it's not about like, it's more about, like, feelings and connection and, like I said, community and creativity, and this just happens to be the medium that's most iterative for me or easiest to use as a tool. I would love to get into film and TV and other types of projects one day, but and that's I hope with exploring book projects that, like,
It can lead into that.
that could be a way to get there.
Yeah, well, one thing I think is interesting, you talking about your college, my experience was kind of a little bit opposite of that. Hyper focused on my degree and organization so much that I think I kind of lost some of that friend opportunity or
Yeah.
that who am I growth period that I really wish I would have invested in. Because I mean, degrees are important, but nobody cares what your GPA is after you graduated.
Mhm.
So I could have still done well in school and figured out more aspects of who I am, but I feel like I put such an emphasis on that that now I'm in my mid 20s and I'm like, what am I doing with my life?
I think that's common in your 20s, and I would try not to put so much pressure on yourself to have it all figured out. I mean, I consider myself a late bloomer, and I'm gonna be in my mid late 30s moving forward, and it's only, like, now that I've come to terms with the fact that, like, I'm on my own path, and even
Mm,
though I have friends and family and other people in my life that seem like they've figured things out earlier than me, and I've definitely felt jealous of them at times, but I wouldn't change anything about my journey now, and I'm proud of how I've navigated a lot of difficult challenges and periods of feeling lost and unsure of myself, and it's taken a lot of healing and growth and trial and error to get to a place where I felt like I felt confident enough to send around a book proposal and be like, "I'm just gonna send this around, we'll see what happens."
mhm.
And then, and I've wanted to write a book forever. So it's really nice to finally, like, be making strides towards my dreams.
Yeah, and I feel like you really when you want something, sometimes it's the more difficult things. You have to take a lot of hurdles to go through to get to where you want to be. And it's a lot easier to sometimes just be like, that's a lot of work and not try. But then you also don't want to look back and be like, man, there's so many things I could have done with my life that I wanted to, but I just didn't put in the effort for it.
Mhm.
Talking about new experiences, so I know you have that blog, Baby Girl. How long had you been thinking about this before
Yeah.
putting it into action?
So I was working on a different book proposal that was about the healing power of kink. And what I realized from putting together that proposal, and I sent it around and it didn't get any interest, which is fine. I'm going to come back to it someday in probably a different form. But I found what was most interesting to me is because of my developmental trauma, I consider myself to be like a perpetual girl, and I'm really interested in girlhood as an emotional experience and less so as a specific time in your life. Like, I am
Uh,
interested in the experience of girlhood when you are a girl, but I'm also interested in how that chapter of your life is so monumental to who you become as a person, as a woman, as whoever you are. And I realized through thinking more about the type of romantic relationship I'm in and what's been healing for me in terms of like that what I was most interested in that process was my experience of being this like perpetual girl.
mm,
I've always in my writing, I've always focused on youth culture mostly. I love young people. I've taught the pre-college program at the Fashion Institute of Technology.
that's so cool.
I've done writing mentorships with high school girls, students that are writers through a program called Girls Right Now in New York. I just like love teen girls. It sounds creepy maybe, but like I think that that was such a monumental period of my life that I really see a lot of what girls experience, I see myself still kind of grappling with certain aspects of my
Aspects.
girlhood.
I've noticed that too with a lot of trends that were popular when I was
Exactly.
a kid are coming back, and they're coming back with people who are my age. And I think a lot of it is because when you're I think this is kind of a woman thing, but like when you're young, you're forced to grow up so quickly because there's so many obstacles or things that you have to deal with that a guy might not necessarily have to deal with. An example I can think of is just the way people will talk to you and treat you is so differently
Mhm.
than someone who is more masculine. Or even just, sayings like boys will be boys and using that as an excuse for behavior that isn't okay. And so I don't know if that makes you feel better anyway, but I think that a lot of people who are female identifying really resonate with that because there's a lot of things that I used to like when I was younger and now they're coming back again
Yeah,
because I'm allowing myself to do things that I forced myself to give up when I was younger.
yeah, and part of the reason I decided, "Oh, I wanna start this newsletter, blog, whatever it is, platform," about, like, my perspective as a perpetual girl who's focused on youth writing reporting on youth culture and often things that girls are interested in or doing, and then seeing how all these, like, girlhood aesthetics are coming back for adult women, I thought that there was something to explore there that's deeper than just a surface level aesthetic, like the tomato girl summer or the guava girl summer or, any of these things. I find that very fascinating, and my book concept comes out of that idea, and what I'm studying in school has so far been connected to that interest.
Mm.
So, I think I've been able to, even if this initial book proposal didn't come together, it led me to this place and got me thinking more about girlhood and it being these feelings that that the trends are coming back and people are grappling with, like, similar feelings that they might have felt when they first experienced those things.
Or realizing that it's okay to like everyone's timeline is different. So just because Susie Q no longer plays with Barbies doesn't mean that you can't
Yeah.
anymore. And it might feel weird, being an adult doing things that maybe other adults aren't doing, but if it brings you joy and it's not hurting anyone, what's the problem with it? And I think
Yeah.
that that's kind of where people are realizing, okay, I'm an adult. What am I doing with my life now? What do I like? And then thinking about things they liked when they were younger and like using that as a starting point
Mhm.
to lead them
Exactly.
into, where they want to go from there.
Yeah.
So I just want to commend you for actually taking the time to pour into yourself and see where you're at and try and improve your mental state because I think it's a lot easier to sometimes pretend everything's okay, at least in the
Yeah.
public eye, even when you're not feeling that.
I used to be, like, on vulnerable, and I realized that that made me feel more unstable, and so there's always things going on in the background that people don't see, and even if I do get a book deal or a job or whatever it is, like, I have chronic illnesses, and I'm gonna be in recovery for the rest of my life, and I think we need to treat people with kindness and with care and compassion and not just assume that their wins are telling the full picture or, um, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, that it's not okay, you get here and you're all good. It's a process and it's not
Yeah.
linear, just like life. I think that people typically do think of things though as, okay, you have figured out now, let's move on. It's not an issue anymore, but it's a day-to-day thing that you live with. And I think until you are either someone who lives with something or you are very close with someone who lives with that, I think those are typically the only times people get more compassion for it because they see how different things affect one another. So, two closing questions that I wanted to have for you of where do you feel like you currently are with yourself in terms of, throughout your life everybody has highs, lows, middles, mediums. Where do you think you are at your life process with feeling secure in who you are?
I'm still really figuring out who I am, I would say. Because of my trauma, I rely a lot on external validation, and that's not really the way to live your life, and it's something I'm actively working on through trauma therapy, but I think seeing the response I've gotten from sending out this new book proposal, has been really positive and really affirming in my desire to write books.
Mhm.
I viewed myself as I've historically viewed myself very negatively and been really hard on myself, and I'm day in, day out learning how to challenge that, but it's hard when it's woven into the fiber of your being.
Yeah,
So
I get that as being part of the iPhone generation. I think social media plays such a integral part of how you view yourself sometimes because it's real easy to do the comparison game of where people are at in their lives and feel like you're not adequate.
yeah, I've definitely done a lot of comparison mentality, and that has only hurt me. But I think things are coming together for me in my career in a way that I've always wanted, and that's helping me build more confidence. I experienced disassociation from my CPTSD, and, one of my friends will be like, "Of course you're gonna get a book deal. You've written for all these things, and when you Google you, you know, comes up they're a public figure," and I'm just like, I feel so disconnected from that, like, that doesn't even feel like it's me. Like, I have trouble locating in my body and in my brain the part of me that has achieved,
All these things.
and so I hate to say it, but I feel like once I get a book deal, it'll feel more real to me that I'm worthy of writing a book, and I'm worthy of things I dream of for myself.
It makes sense. I mean, when I've looked at a lot of things that you've done, I did the self comparison of, wow, man, that couldn't be me. I wish I could do cool things like that. I wish that I was as strong in my voice. I wish that I was so good at all these things that she's good at. I think it's a lot easier to recognize other people's achievements than your own. And I also think it's hard to take compliments sometimes. Like, it's easy to
Totally.
give. If someone compliments me on something I've done, I'm like, okay, moving on. I don't even take
I
it
can't.
in
I can't,
because
it's like
yeah, it feels awkward. But I think one thing I'm working on is trying to be more accepting of kindness other people are willing to give me. And
mhm.
it's not an easy thing. I guess, last question. One question I try and ask every guest that I've had on is, quote unquote, era do you think you're currently in? So I'm in my pivoting era. I've had other people say that they're kind of in their self growth era or their, kicking butt era. Where do you think you currently stand?
I mean, I'm still very much in my healing girl era, but I don't think that will ever end for me.
Mm,
I don't think that ends for anyone. I especially don't think that will ever end for me because I have chronic conditions. I think I'm in my, like, let's believe in ourselves era.
yes, okay, I love that.
We deserve to believe in ourselves because we have a unique perspective and something to say about the world that resonates with people.
Mhm. Well, also, every person has gone through so many different life experiences. And even I feel like you can grow up in the same household, right? Have the same family and still be a completely different person. And that's what is so important about having different people, right? You don't want to be friends with 80 of yourself. You're not going to have any growth that way, but you're such a special and unique person. You have gifts that only you can offer.
Mhm.
But again, it's hard to kind of recognize that sometimes. Do you have any final thoughts or things that you want to say?
Something I often have said over the years is that it's okay to be a work in progress. I think that's really driven me and helped me push forward even when I felt like other people have things quote unquote figured out and I don't. It's okay to have a journey that doesn't look like other people's. There are so many people, so many women who've experienced quote unquote success later in life and or fulfillment even, like meeting a partner a little later than other people or having kids at an older age or buying a house at an older age or it's okay to be a late bloomer, whatever age you are, and it's a journey and we can try to appreciate the highs and lows and what we learned or how we grew and That's something I've been trying to do for myself. Some days it's
Yeah.
easier than other days.
Yeah, I mean, on days when it's low, it's really hard to appreciate what you're going through. But, once you are out of it, I think, and you see all that you've overcome, it's a lot easier to recognize how resilient of a person you may be.
I think the biggest thing is to speak to yourself kindly and, feel compassion for yourself. It really makes a huge difference in your daily life, and what you might be going through if you're your own if you advocate to yourself for yourself
Hmm.
or for yourself to yourself.
I also just want to thank you for coming on. And if you ever have anything you want to come back and talk about, you're
Yeah,
more
I
than
would love
welcome to
that.
come on. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule and your life because I feel like you have such a cool life story, honestly.
Thank you.
When I was diving into all the things that you've done, my jaw just I had to keep closing my jaw, or like picking it off the
Yeah.
ground, whatever
Oh,
the
well,
saying
thank
is.
you. It's
And then I'm
really
just
been
gonna
an
do
interesting time.
my extra real quick. So, thank you for joining me on this journey of rediscovery. If today's conversation resonated with you, this is the part that I feel awkward about, but I'd like for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who might need it. Remember, healing isn't linear and growth takes courage, but you're never alone in it. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow the Rediscovery Journal on Instagram at the Rediscovery Journal and connect with our community. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and most of all, keep showing up for yourself.